They lied. My mother never abandoned me. The words cut through the ballroom so sharply that even the clinking glasses stopped. 8-year-old Addison Carter stood in the middle of the charity event, her small fingers wrapped around the worn bracelet on her wrist. Bright lights reflected off crystal chandeliers above, but all eyes were suddenly on her. A few feet away, billionaire Samuel Russell froze. "Addison," Evelyn Harper said quickly, forcing a smile. "Let's go back with the others." But Addison didn't move. Her eyes stayed on Samuel. "They told me she never came back," she said softly. "But somebody is hiding the truth." For a second, Samuel's gaze dropped to the bracelet. The color drained from his face. "Who told you that?" he asked. Addison pointed across the room, straight at Evelyn Harper. "If you're watching from somewhere in the world today, take a moment to comment your country and local time below. I'd love to see where everyone is joining from. And if stories about courage, kindness, and hidden truths mean something to you, don't forget to subscribe and follow along for the next chapter of Addison's journey." The next morning, Rosewood Children's Home looked exactly the way it always did. The old brick building sat between two narrow streets on Chicago's south side. A cold wind rattled the metal fence surrounding the property. The sky was gray. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete and burned coffee drifting from a nearby diner. Inside, the breakfast bell rang. Children shuffled into the cafeteria. Plastic trays scraped against metal counters. Milk cartons thumped onto tables. Nothing seemed different. But Addison Carter knew everything had changed. The moment she had pointed at Evelyn Harper the night before, she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She sat quietly at the corner of a long table, pushing scrambled eggs around with her plastic fork. Across the room, Evelyn spoke with two staff members. Her smile looked normal. Too normal. Every few seconds, her eyes drifted toward Addison, then away, as if nothing had happened, as if an 8-year-old girl hadn't accused her in front of one of the most powerful donors in the city. Rachel Bennett entered the cafeteria carrying a clipboard. Unlike most employees, she actually greeted the children by name. "Morning, Ethan." "Morning, Sophia." "Good morning, Addison." Addison looked up. Rachel smiled warmly. Addison tried to smile back. Tried, but couldn't. Rachel noticed. She always noticed. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Addison nodded, then shook her head, then stared down at her tray again. Rachel pulled out a chair. "Want to talk?" Before Addison could answer, Evelyn's voice cut across the room. "Rachel." Rachel looked up. "We need to review intake reports." The tone sounded friendly. The eyes didn't. Rachel stood. "I'll catch up with you later, okay?" Addison nodded. She watched Rachel leave. The cafeteria suddenly felt colder, much colder. Outside, Samuel Russell stepped out of a black SUV. The morning wind tugged at his coat. His security team followed several steps behind. Unlike the previous evening's polished charity event, today's visit wasn't public. No cameras, no reporters, no speeches, just questions. Questions he couldn't stop thinking about. The image of Addison's face had followed him all night. So had her words. They lied. "My mother never abandoned me." Samuel had spent years learning when people were telling the truth. Investors lied, executives lied, politicians lied. Children usually didn't. Especially not children who had nothing to gain. Walter Jenkins stood by the entrance. The elderly security guard opened the door. "Morning, Mr. Russell." "Morning." Walter hesitated, then glanced toward the hallway. "You'll probably find Miss Harper in her office." Samuel nodded. But before walking away, he noticed something unusual. Walter looked nervous. Not intimidated. Nervous. as though he wanted to say something, yet chose not to. Interesting, very interesting. Meanwhile, Addison sat in her classroom. The room smelled faintly of pencil shavings and dry erase markers. Sunlight filtered weakly through dusty windows. The teacher was explaining fractions. Most children listened. Addison didn't. Her attention drifted toward the hallway, toward Evelyn's office, toward Samuel Russell, toward the questions nobody ever answered. She touched the bracelet around her wrist. The leather had faded long ago. The tiny silver charm hanging from it was scratched. Her mother had put it on her wrist when she was very little. At least, that's what she remembered, or maybe wanted to remember. Sometimes she wasn't sure anymore. A memory repeated often enough could start feeling like a dream. The classroom door opened. A staff member appeared. Addison. Several children turned. The teacher paused. Yes? Miss Harper wants to see her. The room grew quiet. Addison's stomach tightened. She stood. The walk down the hallway felt longer than usual. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the floor. When she entered Evelyn's office, the smell of expensive perfume filled the room. Evelyn smiled. Come sit down. Addison remained standing. Evelyn folded her hands. What happened yesterday was unfortunate. Addison said nothing. You embarrassed yourself. Still nothing. You embarrassed this home. Nothing. A muscle twitched in Evelyn's jaw. Do you understand? Addison looked directly at her. No. The answer landed heavily. Evelyn leaned forward. Your mother abandoned you. Addison felt her fingers tighten around the bracelet. How do you know? Because she left. Did you see her leave? Evelyn blinked. For a moment she seemed caught off guard. No. Then how do you know? The room went silent. Addison's voice wasn't loud, wasn't angry, just honest. That somehow made it stronger. Evelyn stood. The conversation was over. You may return to class. Addison walked out. But something strange happened. For the first time in years, Evelyn looked worried. Really worried. Across the building, Samuel sat in a conference room reviewing documents. Stacks of paperwork covered the table. Financial reports, inspection records, donation summaries. Everything appeared perfect. Too perfect. Rosewood supposedly spent nearly every donated dollar on the children. Yet the building showed signs of neglect. Old plumbing, worn furniture, aging classrooms. The numbers didn't match what his eyes saw. Samuel tapped a finger against the table. Then another thought returned. Addison. Children noticed things adults ignored. He remembered that from his own childhood. A knock interrupted him. Rachel entered carrying folders. Mr. Russell? Rachel Wright, Rachel Bennett. Samuel gestured toward a chair. She sat. What do you think of Rosewood? He asked. Rachel hesitated. A long hesitation. The kind people made when they were deciding how much truth was safe. It's complicated. Complicated usually means there's more to the story. Rachel glanced toward the closed door, then lowered her voice. Addison isn't a troublemaker. I never thought she was. Most people do. Samuel nodded. Why? Because she asks questions. Rachel sighed. The same questions. What happened to her mother? Rachel nodded. Every year. Samuel leaned back. Do you know the answer? No. Do you believe her mother abandoned her? Rachel didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out the window. Snowflakes had begun drifting through the gray sky, tiny white dots against steel-colored clouds. Finally, she spoke. I think someone should have given her proof by now. That answer stayed with Samuel. Proof, not assumptions, not stories. Proof. An hour later, he walked through an administrative storage room. Shelves lined the walls. Boxes stacked floor to ceiling. Dust floated through beams of sunlight. A staff member searched for old donor records. While waiting, Samuel wandered past a cart filled with folders. One e-folder sat partially open, a single page sticking out, just enough to reveal a name. His eyes narrowed. Lillian Carter. Addison's mother. Samuel reached toward it. Before his fingers touched the paper, another hand grabbed the folder. Evelyn Harper. Her smile appeared instantly. Too instantly. "Oh, that's confidential." She closed the folder. Fast, very fast. Samuel stared at her. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. "What was that file?" he asked. "Old records? Regarding nothing important." Samuel noticed something then. For the first time since arriving at Rosewood, Evelyn looked afraid, not concerned, afraid, and people rarely feared harmless secrets. As she turned away, the folder slipped slightly from her grip. Only for a second, but it was enough. Samuel caught a glimpse of a handwritten note clipped inside. 3 words. Contact request denied. His pulse quickened. Evelyn immediately tucked the folder under her arm. "This area is restricted." Samuel didn't move. Neither did she. For several long seconds they simply stared at each other. Then Evelyn walked away, the folder disappearing with her. Samuel remained where he stood, thinking, watching, listening. Somewhere down the hallway children laughed during recess. A distant door slammed shut. The heating system rattled through old pipes, and for the first time, Samuel Russell became certain of one thing. Addison wasn't imagining a story. She had found the beginning of one, and someone was desperately trying to keep the ending hidden. That night, snow fell over Chicago. Streetlights painted pale circles on the sidewalks. Cars moved slowly through slushy roads. Inside his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Samuel Russell stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window. The lights below stretched endlessly. Thousands of homes, thousands of lives, thousands of secrets. Usually, work kept his mind busy, investments, meetings, acquisitions. Tonight, none of it mattered. He couldn't stop thinking about Addison Carter, or the folder Evelyn Harper had snatched away. Contact request denied. The words kept replaying in his head. If Addison's mother had truly abandoned her, why would there be contact requests? Why deny them? Why hide the file? The questions followed him into the night, and eventually into his memories. A memory he hadn't visited in years. He was 10 years old again. Sitting alone in a foster home kitchen, the smell of burnt toast filled the room. Rain tapped against the windows. A social worker stood near the doorway holding an envelope. Samuel remembered reaching for it, remembered the hope, the excitement. Someone had written to him. Someone cared. But the foster father had taken the letter, folded it, dropped it into a drawer. Months later, Samuel learned the truth. The letter had come from a former foster mother who wanted to stay in contact. He never received it, never even knew it existed. One missing letter, one adult's decision. Years of pain, years of wondering, years of believing he had been forgotten. Samuel closed his eyes. The memory still hurt, not sharply, not anymore, but like an old scar that ached when the weather changed. And suddenly, Addison's determination made perfect sense. Children remembered unanswered questions, sometimes forever. The next morning, Samuel returned to Rosewood. The sky was clear. The snow reflected sunlight so brightly it hurt his eyes. Inside the building, children moved between classrooms. Staff members smiled politely. Everything appeared normal, again, too normal. Rachel Bennett was waiting near the administrative offices. A folder rested under her arm. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept much. "Good morning," Samuel said. Rachel nodded. "Mr. Russell." "You look tired." Rachel gave a small laugh. "I've had a strange week." "So have I." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rachel lowered her voice. "I checked the digital records." Samuel immediately focused. "And I found something odd." "How odd?" Rachel glanced down the hallway before answering. "The file number assigned to Addison doesn't match the year she entered Rosewood." Samuel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means someone changed it." "Accidentally?" Rachel's silence answered the question. "No, not accidentally." They walked into an empty conference room. Rachel opened her folder. Several printed pages lay inside. "I checked 3 times." Samuel studied the documents. Rows of numbers, dates, transfer records, admission files. Most meant little to him, but Rachel understood them. "This code belongs to a child admitted in 2018. She pointed. "Addison arrived in 2016. Samuel looked up. "So her file was reassigned." Rachel nodded. "Or hidden." The word settled heavily between them. Hidden, not lost, not misplaced, hidden. Samuel leaned back. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet." "But you believe it." Rachel looked out the window. Children were playing in the courtyard below, bundled in winter coats, laughing, throwing snow at each other. Then she looked back. "Yes." Before Samuel could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. The door opened slightly. Addison stood there. She wasn't supposed to be in this area. Rachel smiled. "Hey." Addison hesitated, then stepped inside. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "It's okay," Rachel said. "What do you need?" Addison looked at Samuel, then at the floor, then back at Samuel again. "There was something I forgot to tell you." Samuel gestured toward an empty chair. Addison sat carefully. The chair seemed enormous beneath her small frame. The room smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Outside, a snowplow rumbled down the street. "What is it?" Samuel asked. Addison twisted the bracelet around her wrist, the way she always did when she was nervous. "A few months ago, I couldn't sleep." Rachel listened carefully. "So I got out of bed. And I was walking near Miss Harper's office." Samuel exchanged a glance with Rachel. Addison continued. "The door wasn't all the way closed." "What did you hear?" Addison thought for a moment, trying to remember every word correctly. "I heard her talking on the phone." Rachel leaned forward. "Do you remember what she said?" Addison nodded slowly. "Not everything." "What do you remember?" The room fell silent. Even the heating system seemed quieter. Then Addison spoke. "No one can find the file if it never existed." Rachel froze. Samuel felt a chill run through him. Not because the sentence was dramatic, because it was specific, very specific. Children often misremember details. But not details like that, not exact words spoken months ago. "What happened after that?" Samuel asked. "I got scared." "So, you left?" Addison nodded. "I thought maybe I wasn't supposed to hear it." No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "Did you ever tell anyone?" Addison looked down. "I tried." "What happened?" A sad smile appeared on Addison's face, small, tired, adult in a way no child should ever look. "They said I imagined it." Samuel felt something tighten in his chest, not anger, not yet. Something heavier, the knowledge that a child had been asking for help and nobody listened. Rachel looked away, ashamed, not because she had ignored Addison, because she knew others had. Later that afternoon, Samuel walked through the residential wing. Children's artwork covered the walls. Construction paper snowflakes, crayon drawings, family pictures imagined by children who barely remembered family. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry detergent. Voices echoed from distant rooms. As he turned a corner, he noticed Walter Jenkins standing alone near a vending machine. The old security guard seemed deep in thought. Samuel stopped. "Mr. Jenkins." Walter straightened. "Sir, you've worked here a long time. Almost 20 years. 20 years, long enough to know everything. Long enough to see everything." Samuel studied him carefully. Walter shifted uncomfortably. "You care about these kids?" Walter looked surprised. "Of course I do." "Then help me understand something." The older man remained silent. Samuel lowered his voice. "Did Addison's mother ever come here?" Walter's jaw tightened. His eyes moved toward the floor, then toward the nearest security camera, then back to Samuel. That reaction told Samuel more than words. Walter knew something, a lot perhaps, but fear held him in place. Fear built over many years. "I should get back to work," Walter said quietly. He started walking away, then stopped, just for a second. Without turning around, he spoke. "Sometimes people stay silent so long they forget how to speak." Then he continued down the hallway, leaving Samuel standing there, thinking, watching, listening. Somewhere nearby, a classroom door opened. Children's laughter spilled into the corridor. A teacher called attendance. A phone rang in the administrative office. Normal sounds, normal day, normal building. Yet underneath it all, Samuel could feel something shifting, like ice beginning to crack beneath snow. The truth was still buried. But not deeply enough, not anymore, and somewhere inside Rosewood Children's Home, someone was becoming increasingly nervous. Because for the first time in years, people had started asking the right questions. The following Monday felt different. Not because anyone said so, because everyone seemed to feel it. The hallways of Rosewood Children's Home were quieter than usual. Conversations stopped when certain people walked by. Doors closed more quickly. Eyes lingered longer. Questions were spreading, and questions made some people uncomfortable, especially Evelyn Harper. The smell of lemon disinfectant drifted through the administrative wing as Rachel Bennett sat at her desk staring at a computer screen. Her coffee had gone cold nearly an hour ago. She hadn't touched it. A spreadsheet filled her monitor. Rows of file numbers, dates, transfer records, admission codes. Most people would have seen meaningless data. Rachel saw patterns, and patterns told stories. She rubbed her tired eyes, then looked again. The same inconsistency kept appearing. Addison Carter's file number did not belong to her admission year. That much she already knew. But now she was finding something stranger. The reassigned number connected to a storage category. Archived records. Records that should have been locked or forgotten. Rachel clicked through another page, then another. Her pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. A shadow appeared in the doorway. Rachel looked up. Evelyn Harper. The director smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Busy morning." Rachel quickly minimized the spreadsheet. "Just updating records." Evelyn stepped inside. The scent of expensive perfume followed her. "I appreciate your dedication." Rachel nodded politely. "Thank you." Evelyn remained standing, watching, waiting. The silence stretched. Then Evelyn finally spoke. "Sometimes curiosity creates unnecessary complications." Rachel understood immediately. This wasn't a conversation. It was a warning, a polite one, but still a warning. "I understand," Rachel said. Evelyn smiled again. "Good." Then she walked away. Rachel waited until the footsteps disappeared. Only then did she release the breath she had been holding. Across the building, Addison sat in art class. Colored pencils scattered across the table. Children laughed and traded crayons. The room smelled faintly of glue and paper. But Addison wasn't drawing like the others. She was sketching a door, again. The same door she always drew, closed, with light shining beneath it. Her teacher paused beside her. "You really like drawing that door?" Addison nodded. "It's important." The teacher smiled. "What's behind it?" Addison thought for a moment, then shrugged. "I don't know." "Then why is it important?" Addison stared at the paper. "Because sometimes children understood things adults didn't. Because somebody keeps trying to stop people from opening it." The teacher blinked, not sure how to respond, then quietly moved on. At lunch, Addison carried her tray toward her usual table. Halfway there, a staff member stopped her. "Miss Harper wants to see you after lunch." Immediately, several children looked up. Some looked worried, others looked curious. Addison simply nodded, but her stomach tightened again. The food tasted like cardboard after that. An hour later, she stood outside Evelyn's office. A secretary opened the door. "You can go in." The office felt warm, too warm. The heater hummed softly. Sunlight reflected off polished furniture. Evelyn sat behind her desk. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect control, or at least she tried. "Sit down, Addison." Addison sat. The chair felt enormous. Evelyn folded her hands neatly. "I've heard you've been talking about your mother again." Addison said nothing. "I think it's important to accept reality." Still nothing. Evelyn leaned forward. "Sometimes people leave." Addison looked directly at her. "My mom didn't." The answer came immediately. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Evelyn's smile flickered. Only for a second, then returned. "What makes you so sure?" Addison touched her bracelet. The old leather felt smooth beneath her fingers. "Because people who leave don't keep looking." Evelyn frowned. "What do you mean?" Addison met her eyes. I think she looked for me. For a brief moment, something flashed across Evelyn's face. Not anger, not surprise. Fear, small, quick, but real. Then it vanished. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As Addison left, she noticed someone standing farther down the hallway. Walter Jenkins, the old security guard. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Evelyn's office, watching, thinking, as though he wanted to say something, yet never did. Meanwhile, Samuel Russell sat inside a temporary workspace Rosewood had provided. Documents covered the conference table. Financial reports, maintenance expenses, donation records, inspection summaries. The deeper he looked, the more questions appeared. Nothing was dramatic, nothing obvious. Just small inconsistencies, tiny cracks, the kind that often revealed larger problems underneath. A knock interrupted him. Rachel entered carrying another folder. Her expression was serious. Samuel immediately noticed. "What happened?" Rachel closed the door. "I found something." "What kind of something?" Rachel placed a printed document on the table. Samuel examined it. A storage inventory, nothing unusual at first glance. Then Rachel pointed. "Look here." Samuel followed her finger. A section labeled Archived Family Records. Then a note. Restricted access. Director authorization required. Samuel looked up. "Is that unusual?" Rachel nodded. "Very." "Why?" "Because family files aren't supposed to be separated like that." The room grew quiet. Samuel studied the document again. "So somebody moved them." "Yes." "Why?" Rachel shook her head. "I don't know." But both of them knew that wasn't entirely true. She had a theory, so did he. Neither wanted to say it out loud yet. A loud crash echoed from somewhere outside. Both turned toward the window. Children were playing in the courtyard. A basketball had struck the fence. normal, ordinary, life continuing, while something hidden slowly surfaced beneath it. Later that afternoon, Samuel walked through the building alone. The heating pipes rattled overhead. Doors opened and closed. Teachers called students back to class. Everything looked ordinary, until he reached an older section of the building, a hallway he hadn't visited before. The paint looked older here, the lighting dimmer. The air smelled faintly of dust. Storage rooms lined one side of the corridor. Most doors were locked. One caught his attention. A metal door, no sign, no label, just a keypad. Interesting, very interesting. Before he could get closer, footsteps approached. Rachel. She looked slightly out of breath. "I was looking for you," Samuel pointed toward the door. "What's this room?" Rachel followed his gaze. Her expression changed immediately. "I've never been inside." "Why not?" "Only directors have access." Samuel stared at the keypad, then back at Rachel. "The archived files." Rachel nodded slowly. Neither spoke, neither needed to. The connection was obvious. Somewhere nearby a door opened. Voices echoed down the hallway. The moment ended. For now. As they turned away, Samuel glanced back one last time. The metal door remained closed, silent, motionless, keeping its secrets. But not forever, because for the first time in years people were no longer accepting easy answers. And somewhere behind that locked door, the truth was waiting. The wind howled against the windows that night. Chicago winters had a way of making buildings sound alive. The old pipes groaned, the glass rattled softly. Branches scraped against the brick walls of Rosewood Children's Home. Most of the children were asleep. Addison wasn't. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Moonlight slipped through the narrow gap in the curtains. A pale silver line stretched across the room. The bracelet on her wrist caught the light. She turned it slowly between her fingers. Whenever she felt confused, she touched it. Whenever she felt alone, she touched it. Whenever she wondered whether her mother still remembered her, she touched it. Tonight, she held it tighter than usual, because something was changing. She could feel it, even if she didn't understand everything. Somewhere in the building, adults were finally asking questions she had been asking for years. Across town, Samuel Russell sat in his office reviewing documents. Stacks of papers covered his desk. The city skyline glowed beyond the windows. Most people imagined billionaires spent their nights at parties. Samuel spent his reading reports, especially when something didn't add up. And Rosewood didn't add up. The financial records bothered him. A lot. The home had received substantial donations over the years. Corporate grants, private gifts, foundation funding. Yet the facility looked underfunded. The children's recreational areas needed repairs. The library contained outdated books. Several classrooms still used old equipment. The money should have produced better conditions. Much better. Samuel picked up another report, then another. The deeper he looked, the worse it seemed. Not theft, not yet, nothing that obvious, but enough irregularities to justify concern. His phone buzzed. Rachel Bennett. Samuel answered immediately. "Rachel? I found something." Her voice sounded tense. "What is it?" "I don't want to discuss it over the phone." That got his attention. "When can we meet?" "Tomorrow morning." Samuel glanced at the clock. 11:14 p.m. Whatever Rachel had found, it couldn't wait until next week. The next morning arrived cold and bright. Fresh snow covered the sidewalks. Children's footprints crossed the courtyard behind Rosewood. The air smelled sharp and clean. Inside the administrative wing, Rachel closed the conference room door behind her. She looked exhausted. Samuel immediately noticed. "You didn't sleep," Rachel gave a weak smile. Not much. She placed a folder on the table. Samuel sat down. Rachel remained standing, as if she had too much nervous energy to sit. What did you find? Rachel opened the folder. Several pages appeared: copies, printouts, financial statements, donation summaries, maintenance budgets. At first glance, nothing unusual. Then Rachel pointed. Look at these dates. Samuel studied them. January, March, August, November. What am I looking at? Rachel took a deep breath. Every major donation was reported as being spent on child services. And? Rachel slid another document across the table, a contractor invoice, then another, then another. Samuel frowned. The numbers didn't match, not even close. The renovation costs are lower than reported, he said. Much lower? Rachel nodded. Exactly. Samuel leaned back. So, where did the rest go? Rachel shook her head. I don't know. But once again, both understood what the question implied. Silence filled the room. Outside, children laughed somewhere down the hallway. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavy. Then Rachel spoke again. That's not the biggest thing. Samuel looked up. What is? Rachel reached into the folder. Carefully, as though handling something fragile, she removed a single sheet of paper, an old visitor log, yellowed with age. Handwritten entries filled the page. Samuel stared, then froze. One name appeared repeatedly: Lillian Carter, Addison's mother. The first entry was nearly 7 years old. The second came a few months later, then another, and another, and another. Dozens of visits, dozens. Samuel looked up sharply. I thought she never came back. So did Addison. So did everyone. Rachel nodded. The room suddenly felt colder. What happened during these visits? We don't know. Samuel studied the page again. Each entry contained a date, a time, a signature. Lillian Carter. Again, and again, and again. The pattern was impossible to ignore. A woman who abandoned her child did not keep showing up year after year. A woman who didn't care did not keep signing visitor logs. A woman who wanted to disappear did not keep coming back. Something else had happened. Something nobody had explained. At that exact moment, a knock interrupted them. Both looked toward the door. Walter Jenkins stood outside. The elderly security guard looked unusually serious. Rachel opened the door. Walter. He stepped inside. The smell of cold winter air followed him. Walter removed his hat slowly. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, from nerves. Samuel noticed immediately. Walter glanced toward the closed door, then toward the window, then toward the visitor log on the table. His eyes lingered there. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Samuel broke the silence. You know something. Walter lowered his gaze. The old man seemed to struggle with himself. Years of silence fighting against years of guilt. Finally, he nodded. Just once. Rachel sat down slowly. Walter remained standing. I should have said something years ago. His voice sounded rough. Heavy, the kind of voice people carried after keeping secrets too long. What happened? Samuel asked quietly. Walter rubbed a hand across his face. I saw her. Lillian. Walter nodded. Many times. Rachel exchanged a glance with Samuel. Neither interrupted. Walter continued. She used to come here carrying photographs. His eyes grew distant, as though he were watching old memories play out again. Sometimes flowers. Sometimes birthday cards. Sometimes little gifts. The room fell silent. Samuel felt his jaw tighten. What happened to them? Walter swallowed. I never saw them reach Addison. Rachel stared. You mean? Walter nodded. I'd see Miss Harper take them. No one moved. No one spoke. The heating system hummed softly overhead. Outside, a snowplow passed along the street. Inside, the truth settled heavily over the room. Years. Years of visits. Years of cards. Years of gifts. And Addison had received none of them. Walter looked ashamed. Deeply ashamed. I told myself it wasn't my business. His voice cracked. I told myself there was probably a reason. Samuel watched the old man carefully. The regret was real. Painfully real. I was wrong. Walter's shoulders sagged. For years, I was wrong. Rachel looked down. Her eyes glistened. Not because she was surprised, because hearing it aloud made it real, very real. Samuel stood slowly. His mind raced. Questions collided with each other. Why hide the visits? Why hide the gifts? Why hide the records? Most importantly, why hide the mother Walter reached into his coat pocket? Everyone looked at him. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Old, worn, creased from years of handling. I kept this. Samuel accepted it carefully. The paper crackled as he unfolded it. A visitor receipt, Lillian Carter. 5 years earlier. The final line stopped him cold. Visit request denied. Authorized by Evelyn Harper. The room went silent. Completely silent. Nobody needed to say anything. The evidence spoke for itself. Not enough to prove everything, but enough to prove one thing. Addison had been telling the truth all along, and somewhere inside Rosewood Children's Home, Evelyn Harper was becoming increasingly desperate. Because the story she had controlled for years was beginning to fall apart. Piece by piece, line by line, secret by secret. And soon someone would ask the one question she could no longer answer. Why? The snow began falling again that afternoon. Large flakes drifted past the windows of Rosewood Children's Home. The world outside looked softer, quieter, cleaner. Inside the building, nothing felt clean anymore. Not to Samuel Russell. Not after what Walter Jenkins had revealed. The visitor logs, the denied requests, the gifts that never reached Addison. Every new piece of information pointed in the same direction. Someone had been standing between a mother and her daughter for years, and that someone appeared to be Evelyn Harper. Samuel stood beside a window in the conference room. His reflection stared back at him. Behind him, Rachel Bennett reviewed copies of records spread across the table. Neither had spoken much during the past 10 minutes. They didn't need to. The evidence was beginning to speak for itself. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. What do we do now? Samuel turned. We keep asking questions. Rachel looked uncertain. What if she destroys whatever is left? The possibility had crossed his mind more than once. If she's hiding something, Samuel said, panic will make mistakes happen. Rachel nodded slowly. She knew he was right. People who felt trapped often revealed more than they intended. And Evelyn Harper was beginning to feel trapped. Very trapped. At that same moment, Evelyn sat alone inside her office. The blinds were partially closed. The room smelled faintly of coffee and perfume. A stack of files sat on her desk, untouched. She wasn't reading. She wasn't working. She was thinking. Her jaw tightened as she stared toward the window. Walter had become a problem. Rachel had become a problem. Samuel Russell had become a very expensive problem. Everything had been manageable before Addison spoke at the fundraiser. Before one little girl decided to stop staying quiet. Evelyn's phone rang. She grabbed it immediately. Hello? A board member's voice came through the speaker. The conversation lasted only 3 minutes. When it ended, Evelyn's expression darkened further. The board wanted updates. The board wanted transparency. The board wanted answers. And for the first time in years, Evelyn realized she might not control the situation much longer. Meanwhile, Addison sat in the library. The room was nearly empty. Only the soft turning of pages broke the silence. Dust floated through beams of afternoon sunlight. The smell of old books filled the air. She wasn't reading. The open book sat forgotten in front of her. Instead, she watched snow gather on the windowsill. Rachel entered quietly. Addison looked up. Immediately she noticed something. Rachel looked sad. Not hopeless, just sad. The kind of sadness people carried when they learned someone had been hurt. Rachel sat beside her. For a moment neither spoke. Then Rachel smiled softly. "How are you doing?" Addison shrugged. "I don't know." An honest answer. Rachel appreciated that. Most adults would have lied, said they were fine. Addison simply told the truth. Rachel looked toward the falling snow. "Can I ask you something?" Addison nodded. "If your mother came back someday, what would you say to her?" The question hung between them. Addison thought carefully. Not because she didn't know, because she wanted the answer to be right. Finally she spoke. "I'd ask why nobody let her find me." Rachel looked away, quickly, pretending to watch the snow. Addison noticed. Children noticed more than adults realized. Far more. Later that afternoon, Samuel requested a formal meeting. Evelyn accepted. She had little choice. The meeting took place inside the administrative conference room. The air smelled faintly of printer toner and stale coffee. Rachel sat beside Samuel. Evelyn sat across from them. Perfect posture, perfect expression. Or at least she tried. Walter remained near the back wall, silent, watching. The atmosphere felt tense from the beginning. Samuel opened a folder. Inside were copies of the visitor logs, copies of denied requests, copies of archived records. He placed them carefully on the table. Evelyn's eyes flickered downward, only for a moment, then returned to Samuel. "What is this?" "A conversation," Samuel replied. Evelyn folded her hands. "What would you like to discuss?" Samuel slid the visitor log forward. Lillian Carter. No reaction, or almost none, just the slightest tightening around Evelyn's eyes. "What about her? According to these records, she visited repeatedly." Evelyn nodded. "Years ago. Addison was told her mother abandoned her." Evelyn remained calm, at least outwardly. There were complicated circumstances. Samuel studied her carefully. "What circumstances?" Evelyn leaned back. "The details are confidential." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. The answer sounded rehearsed. Too rehearsed. Samuel continued. "Did Lillian attempt contact?" "Perhaps." "Did she send letters?" "Possibly." Every answer avoided the question. Every answer created more questions. The room grew quieter. Outside, wind rattled against the windows. Then Samuel asked the question that mattered most. "Why were visit requests denied?" Evelyn's expression hardened slightly. "For the child's welfare." Rachel frowned. "What specific welfare concern?" Evelyn turned toward her. "I don't have to justify every administrative decision made years ago." The answer landed heavily, because it wasn't an answer. It was avoidance. Samuel noticed Walter watching from across the room. The old security guard looked increasingly uncomfortable, as though he recognized what was happening, as though he had heard these explanations before. Then something unexpected happened. Something small, but important. Samuel picked up one of the visitor records. According to this file, there was no correspondence. Evelyn nodded immediately. "Correct." Samuel turned another page. "No letters." "Correct." Another page. "No communication." "Correct." Then Samuel placed a different document on the table. A denied visitation request. Evelyn glanced down, just briefly, and then she said it. The mistake. The sentence she couldn't take back. The visits stopped after the third letter anyway. Silence. Absolute silence. Rachel froze. Walter looked up sharply. Samuel didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak. For several seconds nobody did, because everyone in the room understood exactly what had happened. Evelyn understood too. The realization appeared instantly, like lightning behind her eyes. Too late. Much too late. Samuel finally broke the silence. His voice remained calm. Very calm. The third letter? Evelyn's jaw tightened. She said nothing. Samuel leaned forward slightly. A moment ago you stated there were no letters. Still nothing. Rachel stared at Evelyn. The pieces connected rapidly inside her mind. No letters. Then suddenly 3 letters. Both statements couldn't be true. The contradiction sat in the middle of the table. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to explain away. Walter slowly lowered his gaze, as though witnessing something inevitable, something years overdue. Evelyn attempted to recover. You misunderstood. No, Samuel replied quietly. I don't think I did. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, control was slipping away. For the first time since this investigation began, Evelyn Harper looked frightened. Not irritated, not defensive, frightened. Because she had spent years controlling information, years controlling records, years controlling the story. And now the story was beginning to control her. Samuel gathered the documents slowly, one by one, carefully, methodically. Then he stood. This conversation isn't finished. Evelyn said nothing, because there was nothing useful left to say. As Samuel walked toward the door, Rachel followed. Walter remained behind. The old security guard glanced once toward Evelyn, then away, a silent witness, no longer completely silent. Outside the conference room, Samuel stopped. Rachel looked at him. Did you hear it? Samuel nodded. Every word. Rachel exhaled slowly. For the first time, undeniable proof had appeared. Not enough to solve everything, not yet, but enough to reveal a crack in the wall. A very large crack. And somewhere inside Rosewood Children's Home, hidden behind locked doors and altered records, the rest of the truth was waiting. The atmosphere inside Rosewood changed overnight. Not dramatically, not in ways visitors would notice. The walls were still painted the same soft colors. The classrooms still followed the same schedules. The cafeteria still served the same meals. But beneath the surface, tension spread through the building like a crack moving through glass. People whispered more, smiled less, watched each other carefully. And at the center of it all sat a little girl named Addison Carter. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew one thing. Adults were arguing about the truth. And somehow, the truth involved her. 3 days after Evelyn's mistake in the conference room, Addison returned from school to find something unusual. Her belongings had been moved, her books, her clothes, her drawings. Even the small stuffed rabbit she had owned for years. Everything sat inside boxes. She stopped in the doorway. The room felt unfamiliar. A staff member stood nearby. We're moving you, Addison blinked. Why? The woman avoided eye contact. It's temporary. To where? The second floor. Addison looked around. Nothing made sense. Rachel had promised nobody would move her, not without a reason. Yet here her things were, packed, ready, as though someone wanted her somewhere else. The feeling settled heavily in her stomach. Not fear, not exactly. Something colder. That feeling children got when adults stopped explaining things. Later that afternoon, Rachel stormed into Evelyn Harper's office. The door slammed behind her. For once, Rachel didn't care. "You moved, Addison." Evelyn remained seated behind her desk, calm, controlled, almost bored. "The housing adjustment is temporary." Rachel folded her arms. "You didn't tell me. I don't need your permission." She's already stressed. Evelyn looked up from her paperwork. "And she's creating disruption." Rachel stared at her. "She's 8 years old." Evelyn's jaw tightened. For a brief second, then relaxed. "Exactly." The answer hung in the room. Rachel understood what it meant. Evelyn wasn't seeing Addison as a child anymore. She was seeing her as a threat, and that realization frightened Rachel more than anything else. Meanwhile, Samuel Russell sat inside a downtown office building several miles away. For the first time, the matter had moved beyond personal curiosity. His legal team occupied the conference room around him. Folders covered the table. Laptops glowed beneath bright lights. Outside, traffic crawled through downtown Chicago. Inside, the conversation had become serious. A lawyer adjusted her glasses. "We need to proceed carefully." Samuel nodded. "I know." Another attorney spoke. "If records were manipulated, there could be regulatory violations." Possibly, she repeated. Samuel looked toward the window. The city stretched endlessly beneath gray clouds. "I don't want assumptions." The room fell silent. He turned back toward them. "I want facts." Because facts mattered, especially when children were involved. Too many adults rushed toward conclusions. Too many people preferred outrage over evidence. Samuel refused to become one of them. The truth needed to be proven. Not guessed, not imagined, proven. Back at Rosewood, evening settled over the building. The hallways dimmed. The smell of dinner faded. Children prepared for bed. Addison sat alone in her new room. The radiator clicked softly. Warm air drifted through metal vents. Outside the window, snowflakes floated through the darkness. Everything felt wrong. She opened a notebook, then closed it again, opened it once more, then stared at a blank page. A quiet knock came at the door. Rachel. Addison looked up immediately. Rachel entered carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Steam curled upward. The sweet smell filled the room. A small smile appeared on Addison's face. The first one all day. Rachel handed her a mug. "Thought you might need this." Addison wrapped both hands around it. The warmth felt nice. For a while, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Then Addison finally asked the question. "Am I in trouble?" Rachel looked surprised. "No." "Then why did they move me?" Rachel hesitated. She wanted to tell the truth, but not all of it, not yet. "Some adults are trying to figure things out." Addison looked down into her cup. Tiny ripples moved across the surface. "They don't believe me." Rachel immediately answered, "I do." The response came so quickly that Addison looked up. Rachel smiled softly. "I believe you." The room grew quiet again. Outside, wind brushed against the window. The radiator hissed softly. Then Addison spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. "The truth is like a little light." Rachel waited. Addison stared toward the door. "You can shut the door." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "But it still slips through." Rachel felt her throat tighten, because the words sounded simple, the way children's words often did. Yet they carried something larger, something wiser, a truth hidden inside a child's observation. The image stayed with Rachel long after she left the room. The truth is like a little light. You can shut the door, but it still slips through. Downstairs, that light was beginning to shine. Rachel knew it. Samuel knew it. Even Walter Jenkins knew it. The old security guard sat alone at his desk that night reviewing decades of memories. Faces, names. Children who had come and gone, some adopted, some reunited with families, some forgotten by nearly everyone. Walter rubbed tired eyes. The security monitors glowed softly in the dark office. Then he noticed something strange. A light. Down one of the basement hallways. His forehead creased. Nobody should have been there, especially not after hours. Walter stood. Slowly. His knees complained as he walked. Age had made every movement harder. But curiosity pushed him forward. The basement smelled faintly of dust and old paper. His flashlight beam swept across concrete walls. Storage rooms lined the corridor. Most sat dark and silent. Then he saw it, a narrow strip of light beneath a metal door. The same locked storage room Samuel had noticed days earlier. Walter approached, carefully, quietly. Voices drifted through the door. One voice belonged to Evelyn Harper. Walter recognized it immediately. The second voice was unfamiliar, a man. The conversation sounded tense, urgent. Walter moved closer, just enough to hear fragments. "Can't stay here, too many questions." Before they find it, Walter's pulse quickened. Find what the voices lowered. Walter couldn't hear the rest. Then came the sound of something heavy moving. Boxes, many boxes. Walter stepped backward. His heart pounded harder than it had in years, because he suddenly understood something. The records were still there. Whatever Evelyn had hidden, whatever she feared. It remained inside that room, and now she was trying to move it. The next morning, Walter arrived at work earlier than usual. Snow covered the parking lot. The air burned inside his lungs. His hands trembled as he dialed a number. Samuel Russell answered after the second ring. "Walter?" The old security guard swallowed, then spoke quietly. "We have a problem." Silence. Then Samuel's voice hardened. "What happened?" Walter looked toward the building, toward the hidden basement, toward the secrets buried beneath years of silence. And for the first time he finally chose a side. "I think I found where they're keeping everything." Samuel Russell arrived at Rosewood before sunrise. The sky above Chicago was still dark. Streetlights reflected off fresh snow. The parking lot crunched beneath tires as black SUVs rolled to a stop. The cold air stung his face the moment he stepped outside. Walter Jenkins was already waiting. The elderly security guard stood near the side entrance with both hands buried deep inside his coat pockets. He looked nervous, but determined. For the first time since this began, fear no longer controlled him. Samuel walked toward him. "You sure?" Walter nodded. "As sure as I've ever been." Rachel Bennett arrived moments later. Behind her came two representatives from the city's Child Services Oversight Office. Not police, not reporters, not television cameras, just officials authorized to inspect records. Everything would happen properly, legally, carefully, the way it should. Walter led them through the building. The hallways felt strangely quiet. Only the hum of fluorescent lights echoed overhead. Most of the children were still eating breakfast. The smell of toast drifted from the cafeteria. Some staff members watched the group pass. Others quickly looked away. Word traveled fast inside Rosewood. Everyone knew something was happening. Nobody knew exactly what. At the end of a basement corridor, Walter stopped. The metal storage door stood before them. Silent. Closed. The same door Samuel had noticed days earlier. One of the city representatives stepped forward. "Who has access?" Walter answered. "Evelyn Harper." "Anyone else?" "Not officially." Rachel exchanged a glance with Samuel. The representative knocked firmly. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. Then a second official used authorization paperwork obtained that morning. Within minutes, maintenance staff arrived. The lock was opened. The door slowly swung inward. A stale smell rushed out immediately. Dust, old paper, cardboard, years of forgotten records. The room stretched farther than anyone expected. Shelves lined the walls. Boxes sat stacked from floor to ceiling. Some labeled, many not. Silence filled the corridor. Rachel stared. Walter lowered his head. Samuel stepped inside. His footsteps echoed softly against concrete. The beam from a flashlight moved across the shelves. File after file. Box after box. Thousands of records. The city representatives began documenting everything. Photographs, inventory notes, storage conditions. Procedures mattered. Especially now. Then Rachel stopped abruptly. "What is that?" Everyone turned. She stood beside a shelf near the back wall. A cardboard box rested there. Unlike the others, it carried no official archive label, only a handwritten note. Family contact. Samuel felt his pulse quicken. Carefully, Rachel opened the box. The room fell completely silent. Inside sat dozens of envelopes, letters, photographs, greeting cards, holiday cards, birthday cards. Some unopened, some still sealed. The dust covering them suggested they had been sitting there for years. Rachel picked up one envelope. Her hands trembled. The return address read Lillian Carter. Nobody spoke, nobody needed to. The evidence had arrived. And it was worse than anyone imagined. One of the city representatives carefully examined the contents. Every item was cataloged, photographed, recorded. The process took time. No shortcuts, no assumptions, just facts. Then Samuel noticed something else. A smaller file folder buried beneath the letters. He opened it carefully. Inside sat visitation requests, official forms, dates, signatures, approval sections, denial sections, again and again. One name appeared repeatedly. Lillian Carter. One signature appeared repeatedly. Evelyn Harper. Denied, 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 denied. The word repeated across years of paperwork. Rachel pressed a hand against her mouth. The room suddenly felt difficult to breathe in, because these weren't theories anymore. These weren't suspicions. They were records. Permanent, verifiable, real. At that exact moment, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Fast footsteps. Everyone turned. Evelyn Harper appeared in the doorway. The color drained from her face the moment she saw the open boxes. For several seconds, nobody moved. The silence felt enormous. Then Evelyn spoke. "What is this?" One of the city officials stepped forward. "An authorized records review." Evelyn looked past him, toward the letters, toward the visitation files, toward the evidence. Fear flashed across her face. Raw, unfiltered. For the first time, she couldn't hide it. "You had no right." "We had every right," the official interrupted calmly. Evelyn's eyes moved from person to person. Samuel, Rachel, Walter, the shelves. The documents. The room she had kept hidden for years. Control was gone. She knew it. Everyone knew it. But the worst moment had not arrived yet, not even close, because Rachel had opened another file, a thick one, labeled Addison Carter. The room became so quiet that the turning of a single page sounded loud. Rachel carefully read. Then another page, then another. Her expression changed. Shock, then disbelief, then sadness. Deep sadness. "Samuel." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Samuel approached. Rachel handed him the file. Inside sat years of documentation. Letters from Lillian. Requests for updates. Requests for visitation. Requests for phone contact. Requests for family review. Everything. The mother had never stopped trying. Not once. Not for a single year. Then Samuel found the page that changed everything. A handwritten note, attached to a denied visitation request. The handwriting matched Evelyn's. The note read, "Child should not be informed of continued contact attempts." Samuel stared at the words, again and again, making sure he had read them correctly. His jaw tightened. The room felt frozen. Not from temperature, from realization. Addison had spent years believing she was unwanted, while her mother spent years fighting to see her. The cruelty of it settled over everyone present. Even the city officials looked shaken. Then another voice broke the silence. Walter, the old security guard, stood near the doorway, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I saw her." Nobody interrupted. Walter swallowed. Hard. "I saw Lillian cry out in the parking lot one winter." His voice cracked. "I remember because it was snowing." The room remained silent. Walter continued. "She sat in her car for nearly an hour." His eyes glistened. "I should have said something." Nobody blamed him, not in that moment. The real focus stood across the room. Evelyn Harper, she remained silent, cornered by facts, cornered by records, cornered by her own decisions. One city representative finally spoke. "Miss Harper, we'll need you to accompany us for further review." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. The fight had left her. At least for now, no dramatic confession came, no shouting, no scene from a movie, just the quiet collapse of a story that could no longer survive the truth. As officials escorted her towards the hallway, something unexpected happened. Voices echoed from upstairs. Children, staff members, teachers. People had begun gathering. News traveled quickly. Soon, dozens of eyes watched from the staircase above. Nobody said a word. Yet their faces said enough. Shock, confusion, relief, curiosity. They were witnessing something important. Not the punishment of a person. The exposure of a secret hidden for years. Back inside the storage room, Rachel continued reviewing documents. Then she suddenly froze. Completely froze. Her eyes locked onto a page. Samuel noticed immediately. "What is it?" Rachel slowly lifted the paper. A contact information form. Recent. Far more recent than anything else, the date was less than 2 years old. Attached to it sat an updated address and a phone number. For Lillian Carter. Rachel looked at Samuel. Neither spoke for a moment. Because both understood. The letters proved the truth. The visitation records proved the truth. Now there was something even more important. A way to find her. A way to find Addison's mother. And for the first time in nearly 8 years, that possibility was real. The snowstorm ended 2 days later. Sunlight returned to Chicago. The city looked brighter, cleaner, as if winter itself had decided to give everyone a chance to breathe. Inside Rosewood Children's Home, things felt different too. Evelyn Harper was gone, not arrested, not publicly condemned. The investigation was still ongoing. City officials had placed her on administrative leave while records were reviewed. Procedures mattered. Facts mattered. The truth would be handled properly. But even without her presence, the building felt lighter. Children laughed a little louder. Staff members spoke more freely. Doors seemed less intimidating. For the first time in years, many people felt hope. And nowhere was that hope stronger than in Rachel Bennett's office. A single piece of paper sat on her desk. Lillian Carter. Address verified. Phone number confirmed. Current residence confirmed. Rachel stared at the document, then looked toward Samuel Russell. They sat across from each other in silence. Neither wanted to rush. Both understood the importance of what came next. One mistake could create more pain. Especially for Addison, especially for Lillian. "We do this carefully," Samuel said. Rachel nodded. very carefully. No sudden reunions, no dramatic surprises, no television-style moments. Real life didn't work that way. Not when a child had spent years believing she had been abandoned. Not when a mother had spent years believing she was being kept away forever. Professional evaluations would come first. Verification, documentation, counseling. Every step would matter. Still, before any of that could happen, one thing remained. They needed to speak to Lillian. That afternoon, Rachel dialed the number. The call was placed from a private office at the city's Child Services Department. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A small clock ticked softly on the wall. Rachel held the phone tightly. Samuel sat nearby, listening, waiting. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then someone answered. "Hello." The voice sounded cautious, tired, older than Rachel expected. "Hello, may I speak with Lillian Carter?" A pause. "This is Lillian." Rachel swallowed. Suddenly, the moment felt very real. "My name is Rachel Bennett." Another pause. "We're calling regarding Rosewood Children's Home." Silence. Complete silence. Then a sharp inhale. The kind someone made when an old wound reopened unexpectedly. Rachel continued gently. "There are some things we'd like to discuss." The silence returned. Longer this time. When Lillian finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Is she okay?" Rachel closed her eyes briefly. Not because of the question, because of how quickly it came. No hesitation, no confusion, no anger, just concern. A mother's first question. "Is she okay?" "Yes," Rachel answered softly. "She's okay." A quiet sound came through the phone, almost like a sob. Almost. Samuel looked away, giving privacy to a moment that deserved it. Lillian tried to compose herself. "I've waited so many years for someone to call." Nobody spoke for a moment. There was nothing useful to say. Some pain was too large for immediate words. Over the next hour, the conversation continued, carefully, patiently. Details were verified, identity confirmed, records reviewed. Everything matched, every piece, every date, every document. Lillian Carter had never abandoned her daughter. Not once. She had fought for contact, written letters, requested visits, submitted paperwork. Again and again. Year after year. The truth was undeniable now. And somehow that made it even more heartbreaking, because all those years had been unnecessary. Across town, Addison sat in the schoolroom working on a math worksheet. The afternoon sun poured through the windows. Dust floated through beams of light. The room smelled faintly of pencil shavings. She tapped her pencil against the desk, thinking, waiting. Lately, she had been doing a lot of waiting. Adults were constantly having meetings, talking quietly, making phone calls, looking serious. Nobody explained much, but Addison noticed things. She always had. Rachel entered the classroom near the end of the day. Immediately, Addison sensed something. Rachel looked different. Not sad, not worried, hopeful. The feeling spread through the room before a word was spoken. "Addison." The little girl looked up. "Can we talk?" A few minutes later, they sat together in Rachel's office. The radiator hummed softly. A mug of tea sat untouched on the desk. Outside the window, sunlight reflected off snow-covered rooftops. Rachel took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this conversation many times. Still, it felt difficult, not because she didn't know what to say, because she wanted to say it right. "Addison," the little girl waited quietly. "We found some answers." Addison's fingers immediately tightened around the bracelet. Rachel noticed. "We found records." Silence. "We found letters." More silence. Addison's eyes never left Rachel's face. And we found proof that your mother tried to contact you. For several seconds, Addison didn't react, not because she didn't understand, because she was afraid to. Hope could hurt. Children in foster care learned that early. Promises sometimes disappeared. Adults sometimes changed their minds. So she remained very still, very quiet. Finally, she asked one question. Only one. Really? Rachel nodded. Really? The room felt motionless. The clock ticked softly. Traffic passed outside, life continued, yet everything had changed. Addison looked down at her bracelet. Her thumb traced the worn leather. Then another question came, small, fragile. Is she alive? Rachel smiled, a real smile. Yes. Addison stared. Rachel could almost see the emotions moving behind her eyes. Relief, disbelief, fear, hope. Years of questions colliding at once. The little girl lowered her head, not saying anything, not moving, just sitting there. Then Rachel noticed something. A single tear landing on Addison's hand, followed by another. The child quickly wiped them away, as though embarrassed, as though crying might somehow make the moment less real. Rachel reached across the desk, not to hug her, not to overwhelm her, just enough for Addison to know she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, another meeting was taking place downtown. Lillian Carter sat inside a child services office. The room felt sterile. Bright lights, plain walls, a box of tissues sitting on a side table. Across from her sat a caseworker. Nearby rested a small photograph, Addison's most recent school picture. Lillian couldn't stop looking at it. 8 years old, older than the last image she remembered. Beautiful, healthy, growing up without her. The realization broke her heart all over again. Yet there was hope now. Real hope, not imagined, not distant. Real. The caseworker explained the next steps. Counseling sessions, verification procedures, supervised introductions. Everything would happen carefully. Lillian agreed to every requirement immediately, without complaint, without hesitation. Because after waiting nearly 8 years, a little more time felt manageable. Then the caseworker slid something across the table. A photograph. A recent picture of Addison wearing her bracelet. Lillian's hands began trembling. She picked up the photo slowly. The bracelet, the same bracelet, the one she had fastened around her daughter's wrist years ago. A soft sound escaped her lips. Half laugh, half cry. And in that moment there could be no doubt. No confusion. No mistake. The connection remained. Across years, across distance, across lies. Mother and daughter were still linked. The road ahead would take time. Healing always did. But for the first time, both of them were walking toward each other. Not away. And somewhere deep inside Rosewood's old records, one final chapter was waiting to be written. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. No cameras, no reporters, no dramatic surprises. Just a quiet room inside the Chicago Department of Child and Family Services. The walls were painted a soft beige. A small lamp stood in one corner. 2 comfortable chairs faced a couch. A box of tissues rested on a low wooden table. Everything had been arranged carefully. The room was designed for difficult conversations, for reunions, for healing, for second chances. Outside the building, cold winter sunlight reflected off the snow. Inside, 2 lives were about to move closer together after years of separation. Addison sat beside Rachel Bennett. She wore her favorite blue sweater. The sleeves covered most of her hands. The bracelet remained wrapped around her wrist. She kept touching it. Not constantly, just enough to reassure herself it was still there. The room felt too quiet, too still. Every sound seemed louder than normal. The ticking of a clock, the distant hum of an elevator, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights somewhere down the hallway. Rachel noticed Addison bouncing one foot, nervous, very nervous. "You okay?" Rachel asked softly. Addison shrugged. The answer wasn't convincing. Rachel smiled. "You don't have to know how you feel yet." Addison looked at the floor. That actually helped, because she didn't know. Excited, scared, hopeful, confused. All of them felt true. A gentle knock came at the door. The room immediately became silent. The social worker entered first. Then another woman stepped inside, Lillian Carter. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The world seemed to pause. Lillian stopped near the doorway. Her eyes found Addison instantly. Not because someone pointed. Not because someone introduced them. A mother simply knew. Years disappeared in that moment. 8 years, thousands of miles. Hundreds of unanswered letters. None of it mattered. Only the child sitting across the room mattered. Addison stared back. Neither rushed forward. Neither cried dramatically. Real life wasn't like that. Real life was quieter, more fragile, more careful. Lillian slowly sat in the chair opposite her. The social worker remained nearby. Rachel stayed seated. Everyone gave them space. The silence lasted several seconds. Then Lillian spoke. Her voice trembled slightly. "Hi, Addison." The little girl looked down, then back up. "Hi." Another silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar, like two people standing on opposite sides of a bridge they weren't sure how to cross. Lillian clasped her hands together, trying to steady them. "I've wanted to meet you again for a very long time." Addison swallowed. The bracelet felt warm against her skin. "Did you really write letters?" The question came immediately, straight to the heart of everything. Lillian nodded. "Every year." Addison stared. Even when nobody answered. Especially then. The answer hung in the room. Simple, honest, true. Lillian reached carefully into her purse. She looked toward the social worker first, receiving permission. Then she removed something small. A photograph, old, worn, protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. She placed it gently on the table. Addison looked down. A younger woman smiled from the picture. Holding a toddler, a very small toddler, the bracelet was visible even then, on a tiny wrist. Addison blinked, then leaned closer. The room disappeared. The sounds disappeared. Everything disappeared except the photograph. Because for the first time she wasn't imagining a memory. She was looking at one, real. Proof. Lillian watched quietly. Tears gathered in her eyes. But she didn't force anything, didn't rush anything, didn't demand anything. She simply waited. A mother waiting for her child to feel safe. Eventually, Addison looked up. "Why didn't you stop trying?" The question broke everyone's heart. Because only a child who felt abandoned would ask it. Lillian wiped her eyes, then answered. "Because you're my daughter." Nothing more, nothing less. The truth didn't need decoration. Across the room, Rachel quietly looked away, giving them privacy, giving them dignity. For nearly an hour they talked. Slowly, carefully. Questions, answers, memories, small details, favorite colors, favorite foods, stories. Nothing dramatic, just two people beginning to know each other again. The first step, not the final step, just the first. Later that evening, Samuel Russell sat with Addison in a small visitor lounge back at Rosewood. The building felt different now, warmer somehow. The old radiator clicked softly. Snow melted from the windows. Children's artwork covered the walls. Addison held a cup of hot chocolate. Samuel sat across from her. For a while, neither spoke. Then Addison asked a question. A question she had been carrying for days. "Why did you help me?" Samuel smiled slightly. Not because the question surprised him, because he knew it would come eventually. He looked out the window. The fading sunlight painted the snow golden. For a moment he saw another boy, a younger version of himself. Lonely, confused, waiting for answers nobody gave. "When I was young," Samuel said quietly, "I lived in foster homes." Addison looked surprised. "Really?" Samuel nodded. "I spent a lot of time wondering why people disappeared." The room fell silent. Addison listened carefully. "I thought nobody cared enough to tell me the truth." His gaze remained fixed on the snow outside. "And one day I realized something." "What?" Samuel smiled sadly. "The truth doesn't disappear just because people hide it." Addison immediately thought of the door she always drew, the light underneath, the words she had spoken to Rachel. "The truth is like a little light." Samuel continued. "When I met you, I saw someone who refused to stop asking questions." Addison looked down. "I got in trouble." "You did?" A small smile appeared. Then Samuel added, "But you were still right." The smile grew slightly larger. "Not much, just enough." A few weeks later, major changes began at Rosewood. The investigation continued. Additional records were reviewed. Financial audits expanded. New oversight procedures were implemented. Not because a billionaire demanded them, because the evidence demanded them. Rachel Bennett was appointed interim director. Many staff members supported the decision immediately. She knew the children. The children trusted her. That mattered. Meanwhile, Samuel launched a new initiative through the Russell Foundation. Not a publicity campaign, not a charity headline, a practical program. One designed to help children in care systems report concerns safely. Independent advocates, anonymous reporting channels, regular record reviews, protection through accountability. The program would eventually be called Small Voices Initiative, because small voices deserve to be heard, especially when adults preferred silence. One snowy evening near the end of winter, Addison sat at a desk in her room. Colored pencils covered the surface. Sheets of paper lay scattered around her. She worked carefully, patiently. When she finally finished, she smiled. The next day, she carried the drawing to Samuel. He opened it slowly, then stared. The picture showed a closed door, exactly like the ones Addison always drew. But this time, something was different. The door wasn't alone. A small girl stood on one side, a woman stood on the other, and beneath the door, light flowed outward. Bright, warm, impossible to stop. Samuel looked at the drawing for a long time, longer than Addison expected. Then he carefully folded it. Not because it wasn't important, because it was. Very important. And as he looked at that simple picture, he realized something. A little girl had done what entire systems had failed to do. She told the truth, and she refused to let it disappear. Spring arrived slowly in Chicago. The snow disappeared one patch at a time. The trees outside Rosewood Children's Home began showing hints of green. Warm sunlight replaced the gray skies that had hung over the city for months. The building looked different now. Not because the bricks had changed. Not because the paint was newer, because the people inside carried themselves differently. The atmosphere felt lighter. Hope had a way of changing places, even before renovations began. 6 months had passed since the hidden records were discovered. 6 months since Addison Carter stood in a crowded room and spoke the words nobody wanted to hear. They lied. My mother never abandoned me. Those words had changed everything. On a quiet Monday morning, Addison walked through the front doors of her new elementary school. The hallways smelled faintly of fresh paint and new books. Children hurried toward classrooms. Teachers greeted students at their doors. For the first time in a long time, Addison felt something unfamiliar. Stability, not certainty. Life rarely offered that. But stability. A place where she knew she would return tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that. Her backpack bounced lightly against her shoulders as she walked. The bracelet remained on her wrist. Some things never changed. Some things shouldn't. Across town, Lillian Carter waited outside the school. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. The family reunification process was still ongoing. Professionals remained involved. Counselors remained involved. Everything continued through proper channels. Slowly, carefully, safely. But progress was happening. Real progress. Mother and daughter now spent time together every week, shared meals, walks through parks, conversations, memories, new experiences. Nothing magical, nothing instant. Just trust being rebuilt one day at a time. The strongest things in life often grew slowly, relationships included. As Addison exited the school building that afternoon, she spotted Lillian waiting nearby. A smile appeared immediately. Natural, effortless, the kind that no longer needed permission. Lillian smiled back. Neither rushed, neither forced anything, yet every meeting became a little easier, a little warmer, a little more natural, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Rosewood Children's Home continued changing. Rachel Bennett stood in what had once been Evelyn Harper's office. The room looked different now. The blinds remained open. Sunlight filled the space. Children's artwork decorated one wall. Suggestion boxes sat near every hallway. Transparency had become part of the culture. Not a slogan, a practice. Rachel reviewed reports at her desk, monthly audits, independent reviews, program evaluations. The work never stopped. But she welcomed it. Accountability protected children, and children deserved protection. A knock came at the door. Walter Jenkins stepped inside. The old security guard looked more relaxed these days. Years younger somehow, even though his hair remained gray. "Morning, Director Bennett," Rachel laughed. "You still don't have to call me that." Walter smiled. "Still sounds strange." "It does." For a moment they shared a quiet laugh. Then Walter looked around the office. His gaze lingered on the open blinds, the sunlight, the absence of secrets. "It feels different here." Rachel followed his gaze. "Good different," Walter nodded. "Very." Some changes couldn't be measured on spreadsheets. Some changes lived in the atmosphere. Rosewood finally felt like a place for children, not for hiding things. Elsewhere in the city, Samuel Russell stood before a group of community leaders at the launch event for the Small Voices Initiative. The gathering wasn't extravagant. No giant stage, no celebrity appearances, no dramatic announcements, just people committed to improving a system. Social workers, advocates, educators, former foster youth. People who understood the importance of being heard. Samuel stood at a simple podium. The room smelled faintly of coffee and freshly printed brochures. Large windows overlooked the city skyline. As he spoke, he thought about many things. His own childhood. The missing letter. The years of uncertainty. And one little girl who refused to stop asking questions. "Our goal is simple," Samuel said. "Children should never lose their voices because adults are more powerful." The audience listened quietly. Samuel continued. "Systems exist to protect children." His gaze moved across the room. "And when those systems fail, we must have the courage to fix them." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The people in that room understood. They had seen the consequences of silence. They knew the value of truth. A few weeks later, official findings from the Rosewood investigation were completed. The results confirmed extensive record mishandling and improper denial of family contact requests. Evelyn Harper was permanently removed from her position. Additional legal and administrative consequences followed through the appropriate channels. No dramatic courtroom speech, no theatrical ending. Real life rarely provided those. Instead, there was accountability. Documented, verified, enforced. The way justice often worked in reality. Slowly, methodically, but importantly. One warm afternoon near the beginning of summer, Addison visited Samuel's office. The city stretched beyond the massive windows. Sunlight reflected off glass buildings. Traffic moved far below. Samuel had framed her drawing. The one with the door, the girl, the mother, the light underneath. It hung on the wall behind his desk. Addison noticed immediately. "You kept it." Samuel smiled. "Of course." The little girl studied the picture, then looked toward the skyline. "That's a lot of buildings." Samuel laughed softly. "It is." For a while they stood quietly, watching the city. Then Addison spoke, the way she often did. Simple words, simple observations, the kind adults sometimes overlooked. "You know what I think?" Samuel smiled. "What?" Addison considered her answer carefully. "I think people get scared of the truth because they think it's a storm." Samuel waited. "But usually it's just a light." The room fell quiet. Samuel looked at the framed drawing, then back at Addison. Once again, the child had found a way to say something profound without realizing it. The truth wasn't always destruction. Sometimes it was illumination. Sometimes it showed people where to go. Months earlier, Addison had been a little girl sitting alone with unanswered questions. Now she stood surrounded by people who listened, people who cared, people who believed her. Not because she was special, not because a billionaire chose her, because she told the truth. And because the truth mattered, no matter who spoke it, whether it came from a billionaire, a social worker, a security guard, or an 8-year-old girl holding an old bracelet. The sunlight continued pouring through the windows. Warm, bright, steady, very much like the light beneath the door Addison had drawn so many times. The light nobody could completely hide. The light that eventually found its way through. Sometimes the people with the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. In this story, Addison did not change her life because she was powerful. She changed it because she refused to let go of what she knew in her heart. She kept asking questions when others dismissed her. She kept believing when evidence seemed impossible to find. Most importantly, she remained honest even when nobody listened. There is an important lesson in that. Truth often takes time. Justice often takes time. Real change rarely happens overnight. Yet every meaningful change begins when someone is willing to speak up and someone else is willing to listen. This story also reminds us that human dignity is not connected to wealth, status, or position. Samuel Russell helped because he cared, but many other people played important roles too. Rachel listened. Walter found the courage to speak. Lillian never stopped trying. Real change happened because ordinary people chose integrity over silence. If there is one lesson to remember, it is this: never underestimate a sincere voice, no matter how small it may seem. A single, honest voice can reveal a hidden truth, heal old wounds, and inspire others to do what is right. If this story touched your heart, share in the comments what lesson stayed with you the most. And tell us your country and local time. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about kindness, courage, truth, and justice. This is a work of fiction created for storytelling and entertainment purposes.